Chapter 1 of Brenda, Her School, and Her Club. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Brenda, Her School, and Her Club by Helen Leah Reed. Chapter 1. 4 Friends. What do you suppose she'll be like? How can I tell? Well, Brenda Barlow, I should think you'd have some idea. Your own cousin. Oh, that doesn't make any difference. I've hardly thought about her. But aren't you just a little curious? Continued the questioner, a pretty girl with dark hair. No, Nora, I'm not. She's 16 and a half, almost a year older than we are. She's never lived in a big city, and that's enough. Oh, a country girl? I don't know that she's a country girl exactly, but I just wish she wasn't coming. She'll spoil all our fun. How? Asked a third girl, seated on the bottom step. Why, who ever heard of 5 girls going about together? If 3's a crowd, 5's a perfect regiment. I agree with Brenda that it's too bad to have her come. Now, when there's 4 of us, we can pair off and have a good time. The last speaker had a long, thin face, with a determined mouth, and large china blue eyes. She was the only one of the 4 whom the average observer would not call pretty. Yet in her little circle she had her own way more often even than Brenda, who was not only somewhat of a tyrant, but a beauty as well. Brenda and Belle, they carry a spell. The other girls were in the habit of singing, when the 2 B's had accomplished something on which they had set their hearts. Edith, the third of the group, in spite of her auburn hair, was the most amiable of the 4. I say in spite, out of respect merely to the popular prejudice. Nobody has ever proved that auburn hair really indicates worse temper than hair of any other color. Edith almost always agreed with any of the plans made by the others, and very often with their opinions. Dark-haired Nora was the only one of the group who ever ventured to dissent from the 2 B's. Now she spoke up briskly. I know that I shall like your cousin. Why? The other 3 exclaimed in a chorus. I can't tell you why, only that I know I shall. You're welcome to, said Brenda, tossing her head. But I guess if you had just begun to have your own house to yourself, you wouldn't like somebody else coming that you'd have to treat exactly like a sister. Why, Brenda, said Nora, with a look of surprise, and then the others remembered that Nora had had a little sister near her own age, whose death was a great sorrow to her. Why, Brenda, repeated Nora, I wish that I had a sister. Now, Brenda Barlow was not nearly as heartless as her words implied. She had 2 sisters whom she loved very dearly, but they were both much older than Brenda, and by petting and spoiling her, they had to a large extent helped to make her selfish. One of them had now been married 4 years, and had gone to California to live, and the other was in Paris completing her art studies. When Janet married, Brenda had not realized the change in the family, but when Agnes went to Paris, Brenda was older, and she fully felt her own importance as Miss Barlow. It's the same as being Miss Barlow, she said to her friends. The servants call me so, and I've moved my things down into Janet's room. I can invite anyone I want to luncheon, without asking whether Agnes has any plans, and I shouldn't wonder if I could have a dinner party once in a while. Of course, not a very late one, but with raw oysters to begin with, sure. And the other girls laughed, for they knew that Brenda had been practicing on raw oysters for a long time, and that she felt proud of her present prowess in swallowing them without winking or making a face. Mr. Barlow was generally absorbed in business affairs, and Mrs. Barlow had so many social engagements that Brenda did as she wished in most respects. She ordered the servants about when her mother was out, and they were as ready to obey her as her friends were to follow her lead, for when Brenda wanted her own way she never seemed ill-natured. She simply insisted, with a very winning smile, and nobody could refuse her. She had found it very pleasant to rule her little world. It was even pleasanter than being the spoiled and petted child that she had been when her sisters were at home. Her father and mother had never seen how fond she was growing of her own way until they announced the coming of her cousin Julia. "She is older than you, Brenda, and I hear that she is far advanced in her studies. I dare say that she will be able to help you sometimes." "Oh, papa, I hate to have anyone help me. She'll be an awful bore, I suppose, if she thinks she knows more than me." "Grammar, Brenda," said her mother with a smile. "Well, then, more than I," repeated Brenda. "I'm sure she won't be a bore, Brenda, but her life has been very different from yours. She has led a quiet life, for you know she was her father's constant companion until he died." Here Mrs. Barlow sighed. Julia's mother was Mrs. Barlow's sister, and had died when the little Julia was hardly 5 years old. "Uncle Richard was always delicate?" ventured Brenda. "Yes, dear, and he spent his life trying to find a place where he could gain perfect health. Boston was too bleak for him, and that is why you have not seen Julia since she was very little. Your uncle did not care to undergo the fatigue of travelling east, even in the summer, and he could not bear to be parted from Julia. But she was always a sweet little thing." "I hope you won't be disappointed in her," cried Brenda, half in a temper. "I believe you are going to care for her more than you do for me." "Nonsense, Brenda!" exclaimed her mother in surprise. "Well, you can't expect me to feel the same about her, a strange girl, who knows more than I, and is just enough older to make everyone expect me to look up to her. Oh, dear!" Since Brenda had not concealed her feelings from her mother, it was hardly to be expected that she would be less frank with her 3 most intimate friends. After Nora and Edith had bade Brenda good-bye that afternoon, when they had talked about the unknown cousin, they walked rather slowly up the street. "Do you suppose Brenda's jealous?" said Nora in a half-whisper. "Oh, hush!" answered Edith, to whom the word jealousy meant something dreadful. "Of course not." "Well, don't you think it strange for her not to feel more pleased at the prospect of having her cousin with her? I should think it would be great fun to have another girl in the house." "Oh, well, Brenda can always have one of us. Her mother is so good about letting her invite people, and of course she can't tell how she'll get along with her cousin. No, I really shouldn't like it myself." As Nora and Edith walked away, Brenda turned to Belle, in whom she always found a ready sympathizer. "You know how I feel, Belle." "Yes, indeed. I think it's too bad. I'm sure it will spoil half our fun. It's horrid, anyway, to have someone older than yourself ordering you round." "Oh, I don't suppose she'll do that exactly." "Well, it's just the same thing. If she's such a model, as your mother says, she'll make you feel uncomfortable all the time. Then if she's wearing mourning, she can't do the things that you do, and you'll have to stay at home and be polite to her. Yes, I'm really sorry for you, Brenda." With sympathy like this, Brenda began to regard herself as almost a martyr. "Oh, dear," she sighed, "why couldn't she have waited until next winter? Come, Belle," she continued, "you'll stay to dinner, won't you?" Belle hesitated for a moment. "I suppose I ought to go home." "Oh, why?" Belle was silent. She knew that certain unfinished lessons awaited her, and that her grandmother objected to her dining away from home, unless she had first asked permission. She fortified herself, however, by saying to herself, "Oh, well, mother won't care," for her mother was what is commonly known as easy-going, and seldom interfered with her daughter's goings and comings. Belle always enjoyed dining with Brenda. The dining-room was so attractive with its great blazing fire, its heavy draperies, and cheerful oil paintings on the wall. At home she sat down in a large, severely furnished room, with her solemn grandmother wrapped in a white knitted shawl at one end of the long table, her half-deaf Uncle James at the other end, and her brother Jack on the side opposite her. Her delicate mother often dined upstairs. Uncle James usually had some story to tell of misdeeds that he had heard someone ascribe to Jack. "And how a deaf person can hear, I don't see," Jack would say crossly to Brenda. Her grandmother generally read Belle herself a lecture on paying proper respect to one's elders, or some similar subject, while Belle and Jack exchanged glances of mischievous intelligence, which often drew strong reproofs from their grandmother, and sometimes from her mother when she was present. No wonder, then, that Brenda's invitation was a strong temptation to Belle. "Come, silence gives consent," laughed Brenda. Dragging Belle by the arm, she touched the doorbell, and in a moment the two girls were inside the house. "What room is Julia going to have?" asked Belle, as they ran up the front stairs. "Well, you will be surprised. That's one of the things that makes me so cross. Just think of it, Agnes's room's in the L, that sweet little studio that I wanted Mamma to let me have. It's all fitted up for Julia. Don't you call that mean?" Belle pressed her friend's hand. "You poor thing." "Yes, it seems Agnes is sure not to come home for 2 years, and so Mamma thought the studio would be a good place for Julia to practice in, and so there's a piano and, well, let's come and see. We've got time before dinner." Pushing open a door on the second floor and going down a step or two, Brenda and Belle found themselves inside a little reception room. The walls were a deep red, there was a cashmere rug on the polished floor, a clock and 2 bronze figures on the mantelpiece. An open bookcase in one recess, a short lounge in the other, a low wicker tea table, and 2 or 3 small chairs made up the furnishing. "This is just the same as it was," said Brenda, "and so is the bedchamber," pointing to a door on the left of the reception room. "But see here," and she turned to the right. Belle followed, and they found themselves in a long, narrow room, with a bay window at one end and a skylight overhead. On the walls were several large unframed sketches in black and white, together with water-colours and a number of fine photographs and engravings in gilt or ebony frames. Against the wall near the bay window stood a small upright piano with an elephant's cloth scarf over the top. The groundwork of the scarf was of a deep yellow, harmonizing with the tint of the painted walls. There were 2 or 3 comfortable chairs covered in yellow-flowered chintz, and in the centre an inlaid library table with a baize top and an assortment of writing utensils. There were several rugs of a prevailing yellow tint on the polished yellow floor, and one side of the room was occupied by rows of low, open bookshelves, which held, however, only a few books. "I believe Julia's going to have her father's library brought here," said Brenda, in explanation of the empty shelves. "Don't you hate bookworms?" "Yes," responded Belle. "But how lovely this room is! What a shame that you couldn't have it yourself! Why, I thought your mother said that they were going to leave the studio just as it was, until Agnes came home." "Well, so they were, but she won't be home for 2 years, and then she'll probably have a studio downtown, and so they've put most of her things away, and fitted up this room just for Julia. She has to have everything." "I know just how you feel," and Belle pressed Brenda's hand sympathetically. "But then, your own room is lovely." "Oh, yes, of course, but it isn't the same thing as a studio. A studio is so artistic." The girls were standing in the bay window, bathed in a flood of sunshine from the setting sun. They glanced across the broad river toward the roofs and spires of Cambridge. A tugboat went puffing along the stream, towing a schooner loaded with lumber. "Oh my, it must be late. The sun is just dropping behind those Brookline hills. Come up to my room." The room on the floor above the studio, which had formerly been Janet's, also overlooked the river. It was in the main house, and its windows looked down on the roof of the L containing the studio. In fact, the studio, to a slight extent, impeded the view of the river which was obtainable from this upper room. But the room itself was large and cheerful, with a carpet and paper of bluish tint, a large brass bedstead canopied with blue, comfortable lounging chairs, a dainty little sofa, dressing-table, desk, and all kinds of pretty ornaments. A half-open door showed the adjoining dressing-room, with its long pier-glass, and a coal fire blazed in the open grate. "Make yourself comfortable," said Brenda hospitably, "for if you don't mind, I'm going to write a note that I want to send out by Thomas before dinner. It won't take me 10 minutes." Brenda sat down at her little desk, while Belle sank in the depths of an easy-chair near the fire. Just as Brenda finished her note, a white-capped maid came into the room. "Oh, Jane, just give this note to Thomas, please. I want him to take it to Mrs. Gray's, and bring back my new coat. I can't go to school tomorrow without it." "I don't hardly think Thomas can go, Miss Brenda." "Why not?" "Well, he's got to go to the station for your cousin." "My cousin?" "Yes, miss. A telegram came this afternoon that she'd be here at 6:30, and your mother left word when she went out that they wouldn't be much later than that, getting back from the train." "Well, I never! The idea of her coming without anyone's expecting her. Why didn't she write?" "I don't know, miss. I heard something about a letter that got lost, but anyway your mother's gone to meet Miss Julia, and she left word she thought you'd better give up going to the tableau this evening, for she wouldn't like you to leave your cousin alone." "There, Belle, that's the way it's always going to be. Everything for Miss Julia. I don't care. I'm going out just the same. The idea of losing those tableaux!" "But Brenda," began Belle. "No, it isn't any good arguing with me. I never could bear to be interfered with, and Mamma knows perfectly well that I want to see The Succession of the Seasons." "But it's to be repeated tomorrow evening. You know I'm going then." "I don't care. I hate to go to the second night to anything." Belle did not reply, though as Jane left the room she turned to Brenda. "I'd better not stay to dinner tonight." "Oh, do! I don't want to sit alone with Julia. I shan't know what to say to her. No, really, you can't go home." Then, running to the stairs and calling after Jane, Brenda cried, "See that there's an extra place at the table for Belle." After this she began to open the drawers of her bureau, tossing their contents about, and she ran in and out of her closet to bring out one gown after another for Belle's inspection. "Which would you wear if you wanted to make a good impression on a new cousin? I want to look as old as I can, and I believe I'll do up my hair." "Oh, Brenda!" "Yes, I will. Now, see, if I put a string on the band of this skirt, it will almost touch the floor. There, help me." When the skirt was lengthened, Brenda regarded her reflection in the pier-glass with great satisfaction. Brushing her waving brown hair to the top of her head, she gathered it in a soft knot, and thrust a long gold pin through it. "Tell me the truth, Belle, wouldn't you think me 16 years old, if you didn't know?" she cried to her friend, who could hardly conceal her mirth at Brenda's changed aspect. "I don't... Why, yes, of course," as she saw a frown stealing across Brenda's face. Brenda strode around the room with all the dignity she could command, her pretty face somewhat flushed by her exertions in giving her hair just the right touch. As a matter of fact, she looked rather odd, but Belle did not dare tell her that her skirt hung unevenly, and that 2 or 3 short locks of her hair stood out almost straight behind. "Hark! I believe they've come!" Brenda exclaimed. Certainly there was a noise in the hall below. "Where's Brenda?" she heard her mother call. "Well, I suppose we'll have to go down," she said reluctantly to Belle, and the 2 girls slowly descended the stairs. End of Chapter 1. Read by Kara Schallenberg, www.kray.org, on January 19th, 2011, in San Diego, California.